I'm Father John, and I know many of you, or at least by face, but some of you I might not know, so I serve here at the Dormition Monastery. And I'm thankful, as Mother said, that you're here. I'm especially thankful that so many of you were able to come to the Divine Liturgy, sort of make it more of a fuller day and participate in the mysteries of the Church, because if your schedule permits, if it's allowed to make that sort of extra sacrifice, it's nice, because it's better to receive the mysteries than to listen to talks. And so I'm glad you could be here for that. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So this is a talk on prayer. It's kind of, I just want it to be encouraging and sort of generic. It's not the Jesus prayer, contemplation, or how to enter the third heaven, or whatever. It's just, what I notice is that the people come to Dormition Monastery often, and as I was saying in the homily this morning, they're just kind of discouraged, and for different reasons. Not everyone, of course, but all of us at some times we get a little bit worn down. One of the things I've noticed is that people are reading a lot. 40 or 50 years ago, there wasn't that much Orthodox literature in English, but now there's tons of Orthodox literature in English, and people are reading, and that's wonderful. If your native language is English, I recognize some of you have other native languages, and maybe you've had literature in your language for centuries, but we haven't. So people come and they've read St. Paisios, they've read St. Porphyrius, they've read Elder Thaddeus, and they're discouraged. And I'm sure that none of these saints and elders, contemporary people, intended for their writings to discourage people. But they feel like they don't measure up. They try. They read something and they try and they do it and it doesn't work out for them. One of the things that seems to me to be happening is that they think they should do everything that they read. And so I always ask them, well, did St. Paisios do what Elder Thaddeus did? And did Elder Thaddeus do what St. Porphyrius did? And the answer is no. They lived their own unique individual lives. And they lived in a certain type of life that most of us don't live. And so when we read these texts, which are really wonderful and beautiful and filled with helpful advice and direction, we have to sort of navigate how it is that that's going to be absorbed into our life. Not in a way that becomes burdensome, but a way that becomes life-giving and refreshing. And a lot of that centers around prayer, because prayer is our communication with God, and it's ultimately that spring of life within us that allows us to live in the world in a way that's not wearying, but refreshing. So I want to start with one of my favorite stories from the Desert Fathers, not specifically about prayer, but to sort of let you know what I hope is the outcome or the direction of travel for these talks. There's a saying in the Desert Fathers about Abba John the Dwarf. One of the brothers who had a problem with forgetfulness came to Abba John, wanted advice, and Abba John gave him advice, and the brother went back to his cell, and he started to go into his cell, and he realized he forgot what Abba John had told him. So he went back to Abba John and said, "Sorry, I forgot what you told me. Can you tell me again?" And Abba John told him again. Went back to his cell. He was about to go into his cell. He forgot. The saying says he did this several times. He kept going back, and Abba John back to his cell, forgetting. And finally he said, "Well, I can't go back again. I just don't know. Don't have it within me." But a few days later, he ran into Abba John in the marketplace. And he was kind of emboldened to go to Abba John, and he said, "Abba John, forgive me." He said, I forgot the advice you told me, but I did want to come back that I would, sort of wear you out by continuing to ask you the same question over and over and over again. Sometimes we feel like that when we go to confession. We say, "I'm just confessing the same things," and we sort of feel like we shouldn't do. No, we just keep coming back over and over as long as we need to. So anyways, Abba John said to him, when he was told that he did, this monk didn't want to wear him out, he said, "Go get some candles, a handful of candles." And so he did, and he said, "Light one of them," and they did. Fortunately, he could remember these steps. And then he said, "Now take each of the other candles and light it from that first candle that you lit." And he did that. And now he said, "Look at the first candle. Is it any dimmer than it was before you lit the other candles? You know, did the flame get sort of taken away? And the answer is obviously no. It's just as bright as it ever was. And he said, so it is with Abba-John. You can keep coming to me and you won't take the flame away. I won't be diminished. Now, you would think that I wouldn't say this about myself, and maybe most of you wouldn't say it about yourself, but he wasn't saying it about himself. He was saying that he was so connected to the light that comes into the world to enlighten every person, that what he was giving other people was the light of Christ. He wasn't going to wear him out. So there's a kind of spiritual nourishment, a spiritual refreshment. It's really being connected to the vine. We have lots of images in Scripture in the life of the fathers, so that we might get physically tired, we might be sleepy, we might be sort of emotionally tired, but there's a way to, in the midst of all of this, have a sort of spiritual energy. And that doesn't come from ourselves, but it also isn't taken away from us by these other activities. That's true when taking care of the kids or helping out at church or life here at the Dormition Monastery. A lot of times you're so happy it's about to end. Whatever the project is, you know, I'm just about done seeing people, or you know, the kids are going to come home and it's going to be, the kids are going to go to bed and it's going to be a nice peaceful evening, whatever it is. Then something happens, the expectations are shattered. Another person comes, the kids get sick, they're up all night, whatever it is. And we get tired and exhausted, but there is a way to have the spiritual energy. And that comes by being connected to Christ, and that comes by simple prayer. Okay? So that's where I'm headed. I'm headed to just sort of simple ways in which we can move in the direction that Abba-John Dork was. By the way, that saying ends by saying that they live together in this relationship of the guy forgetting and Abba-John reminding him, and they were both saved. So this man became a part of Abba-John's own salvation. So we think we're wearing other people out, but if we're really striving to be connected to Christ, then we're helping them be saved. And they're helping us be saved. Okay, so that's the goal. That's the destination. If we could get there, boy, wouldn't it be wonderful? Now, let's start quite simply. Where do we begin? The first thing I want to say is we begin where we are. Sometimes when we read books about prayer or hear great, wonderful talks or podcasts about prayer, we want to pray 3 hours a day or get up in the middle of the night to pray or pray the Jesus prayer for a long time. All these are wonderful things. These are just great. But so often, this sort of excitement and zeal lasts for a day, a week, 2 or 3 weeks, and then we crash. And it's because we're not realistic about where we are. So we just have to start where we are. Maybe you already pray every day and you pray the prayers out of the prayer book, and maybe you're not praying hardly at all. Well, we just have to be honest with where we are. We have to be honest with where we are because maybe you work night shift, or maybe you're going through changes at work, or maybe you've just had a new child in the family, or whatever it might be. All of these things affect our lives in different ways. So we have to be honest about where we are. And transition sort of sometimes require for us to modify our practice of prayer. So start where we are. The other way, a year or 2 years ago, my mother moved in with us. It changed the routine in our house. It's wonderful. I'm very happy to have my mother living with us. But the routine is different. So it took me like a couple months to figure out how prayer routine fits into my life. 2 weeks ago, my mother-in-law moved in with us. It's really wonderful. That might be temporary, but who knows on these things. That's really wonderful, because my mother-in-law is just wonderful. But that's changed the routine too. And I will just to be honest with you and tell you, my routine is not figured out yet. Because the dynamics in the house are just different, and what times are available, and where the quiet places are, and it's just different. So maybe it'll get sorted out, but maybe in a couple months. But I'm giving you these stories because those things go on in your life, change of jobs, move, new child, whatever it is, and then we get guilty and discouraged and depressed and some down in some kind of deep emotional black hole, which does no one any good whatsoever. We say, look, this isn't where I am. Where I am in the middle of a kind of crazy transition, so I'll pray to God when I can. I'll do the best I can. I'll offer what I'm doing to God. And then I'll keep striving to figure out how it is that a prayer routine fits into the new life routine that I've been given, things I don't have control over. Okay? The other way in which we have to start where we are, that I think is very crucial, important, is we have to start where we are with being honest with ourselves. There's one thing, really, that Christ can't stand in the Gospels, and that's pretending. That's just what he cannot stand. The Pharisees pretend. They have a kind of pretend piety. When we're pretending, we're offering to God someone other than who we truly are. We're offering an imaginary self. And we pretend, maybe a certain kind of way in work or a certain kind of way around our friends. But the worst thing is when we pretend within the life of the church. We pretend a certain type of piety. So then we're offering to God a kind of ideal of what we wish we were like, but we're not. And it's, in a certain sense, it's good intention. We wish we were this way. We want to be this way. And so we sort of act as if we were that way. So we make great crosses and prostrations and vows in the church, but at home we don't do anything at all. We act and sound piously in certain contexts because we know it's the right thing to say, but in other contexts we chew people up and spit them out, and gossip and slander and backbiting, whatever it might be. The normal case way in which this manifests itself is by judging. So when I'm very pious about certain things, inevitably I'm very judging about those things in other people. So we just have to be honest about where we are with our own state. Well, I'm not very good at praying. I get upset at my family members. I'm impatient about this or that thing. I'm anxious and nervous about the financial situation in our family, whatever it might be. God only wants to take us as we truly are. That's why he hung out with the Pharisees. He hung out with sinners. That included the Pharisees, so he hung out with them. But they wouldn't admit that they were sinners. And he hung out with prostitutes and tax collectors and the kind of the disenfranchised people of the culture. What was different about them is that they would admit it. They would offer to God who they truly were. And the Pharisees wouldn't offer to God who they truly were. They would only offer an ideal, a kind of idol. And God longs to sort of smash our idols, including not only our idols of him, but our idols of who we are. So the first thing is very simple. Start where you are, realistically about how much time you have, where the quiet times in your life are, whatever it might be, and also realistically about who you truly are. Don't try to pretend. No pretense. God can't stand that. When we do that, both of those things, unrealistic expectations for how much or how grand our prayer will be, and also unrealistic expectations about what a pious person I am, both of those things will end up short-circuiting our prayer. We might pray for a couple weeks or something like that in a certain kind of way, but it'll all fall apart. Now the next point, first point is start where you are. Next point, Mother Gabriella already stole from me. Stealing it from me. The second suggestion, simple suggestion, is to pray what you might call the disciples' prayer, which is, Lord, teach us to pray. That's the prayer that they prayed. That's the request that they made of Christ when he gave the Lord's Prayer in the Gospel of Luke. Lord, teach us to pray. I would put it that way and not teach us how to pray. That would be okay too, but I would just leave it the way that they said it. And then personal, Lord, teach me to pray. I would suggest, because us might mean subconsciously teach that other person over there to pray. But you can say teach us to pray in the sense of our community, our family. Teach us to pray. Lord, teach out there, teach us to pray in our parish. But it really has to be personalized. Lord, teach me to pray. A couple reflections on this. It's absolutely crucial that we see Christ as our teacher. Ultimately, he's the teacher. He made it very clear. You have no other teacher. What gets quoted often is you have no other father on earth. You only have one father, your Father in heaven. But at the same time, it's called no one teacher. You only have one teacher. Tells the disciples the Holy Spirit will teach them all that they know. He'll remind them. St. John in his first epistle says the same thing. The Lord's our teacher. And every single day we're in his classroom. School doesn't get out at 3 o'clock. There's no spring break. There's no summer break. We're in God's classroom 24/7, 365. He is a kind teacher, and so he's not always, kind of overbearing or anything like that. But he's always interested in teaching us. And the events that arise in our day are not accidental. Those things that seem a little sort of chaotic or distracting to us are opportunities for us to turn to him. So you've heard it said many times, if you ask God for patience, then you have to be willing, Lord, grant me patience. Then he's not going to do it with a magic wand. He's going to put you in situations where you can learn patience. It would be like going to somebody and say to a famous piano teacher and say, teach me the piano. Well, they would have you play the piano. Right? You have to do that. And so if you're going to be taught patience, then you're going to be put in situations where you have to learn patience. Not by sort of just grit your teeth and bear, but how it is that you receive the patience from Christ as a gift. So underlying every virtue, the Fathers are very clear on this, every fruit of the Spirit, every virtue that we can have cultivated in our souls is prayer. Prayer is the most foundational activity that we have, because prayer is how it is that we come to express our reliance and faith and trust in Christ, so that we're not working alone, but with him. St. Paul said that whatever is not of faith is sin. Faith is just relying on God. Sin is simply not relying on God, doing it myself. It's really that simple. And prayer is the way in which I rely on God. Prayer is the way in which, instead of giving a talk by my own strength, I say, Lord, I have no idea what's going to come out. You have to do this. You have to help me. You have to do this. Right? And prayer is the way in which we say, Lord, I need to listen. I'm distracted today, but help me. Help me put these things aside that have come up. You help me listen. Instead of relying on our great academic skills to take good notes and to think that we can manage all this material ourselves, no. Every aspect of our life is relying on God. Now I'm making this meal. I'm making Prospera. I'm visiting a shut-in. I'm trying to not explode in the face of rebellion with my children. Whatever it is, if I try to do that on my own strength, it's sin. Because it's not a faith, because it's not relying on Christ. But if in that moment of tension and sort of distraction and turmoil, inner turmoil, this is what I usually say, Lord, this is too much for me. You have to do something. It's one of my favorite prayers. Lord, this is too much for me. I get to say that often. Lord, this is too much for me. You have to act. Then Christ is brought in. Okay? And so what I'm trying to communicate here is that God is arranging our life in such a way so that he's teaching us how to rely on him. We rely on him in prayer, and by simply saying every day, many times every day, Lord, teach me to pray, it doesn't, I don't know if it changes what he does to me, but it heightens my awareness that these events in the day-to-day life are his lesson plan for me. It's not just accidental. He's trying to teach me to pray. He's answering my prayer to teach me to pray. And so I really just simply encourage you to at least every day just say, Lord, teach me to pray. But then you have to watch out, because he's going to. He will. He'll answer that prayer. Okay? So, begin where you are. Lord, teach me to pray. He's the only real teacher. Everybody else is just kind of a classroom assistant. The third thing we might think about in this sort of simple reflection on prayer is remember that everything that comes to us comes from God. We are not initiating anything with God. We're always responding. Everything is a response to God. He makes it rain on the righteous and unrighteous alike. He makes the sun shine on the righteous and unrighteous alike. The light comes into a world to enlighten every person. Everything that we have in this life comes to us from Him. This is important to remember because sometimes we feel like, Lord, why have you abandoned me? But if we thought for a moment, why haven't you answered this prayer? Why aren't you handling this situation?